The story kicks off with the commercial flight cruising through the sky, where our main character, Jack, is relaxing and pouring himself a drink. Everything seems completely normal as the passengers sit comfortably in their seats. Suddenly, violent turbulence hits, sending massive shock waves through the entire aircraft. The shaking is so severe that unbuckled passengers are thrown toward the ceiling as oxygen masks drop down instantly. At that exact moment, severe air pressure triggers a massive explosion on one of the wings. The blast is so devastating that the tail section rips apart midair, plunging several passengers thousands of feet to their deaths. Within seconds, the plane goes completely out of control, nosediving rapidly toward an uninhabited island. When Jack finally regains consciousness, he finds himself lying in the middle of the deep woods and rushes out in absolute panic. He quickly realizes he is stranded on a deserted island. Hearing desperate cries for help echoing from a distance, Jack wastes no time and runs straight toward the chaos. The crash site is a scene of total devastation, filled with bleeding survivors and pure agony. Being the only doctor around, Jack immediately jumps into action to save lives. But a terrifying noise suddenly catches his attention, and he spots a massive piece of the broken wing about to crush a pregnant woman trapped underneath. Realizing the imminent danger, without wasting a single second, Jack rushed toward the girl and pulled her out of harm's way just before the massive wing slammed down. A split second later, the wing crashed into the dirt, triggering a secondary explosion. Completely ignoring his own painful injuries, Jack immediately went back to work, desperately trying to save more lives. Sadly, due to the intensity of the initial blast, most of the severely wounded survivors had already passed away. A bit later, Jack wandered into the deeper parts of the jungle alone, attempting to stitch up his own deep wounds. However, the gash was located on a spot on his back that he simply couldn't reach properly. Right then, a girl approached him, and when Jack asked for assistance, she agreed to help stitch the wound. She was completely shocked to see that Jack was taking the stitches without any anesthesia, yet his face showed absolutely no sign of pain. This intense moment marked the official beginning of their acquaintance. As night fell, Jack analyzed the shattered tail section of the aircraft and realized that the cockpit might still be intact. He figured that if they could somehow retrieve the transceiver from it, they could establish contact with the rescue team. Upon hearing this, the girl, whose name was Kate, suddenly remembered something crucial. She mentioned that during the day, she had spotted smoke rising from a mountainous valley, which could likely be the crash site of the cockpit, so she immediately geared up to head into the jungle with Jack. This news sparked a new glimmer of hope in Jack's heart, but just at that moment, a chilling, terrifying roar echoed from the deep dark woods. Everyone at the campsite froze in absolute panic, staring toward the direction of the horrifying sound. They watched in horror as distant trees began snapping and collapsing one by one, making it obvious that a massive beast was charging directly toward them. Luckily, the unseen monster decided not to reveal itself, and the surroundings eventually grew quiet again. The next morning, the survivors gathered to discuss the mysterious creature from the night before. Some speculated it was a prehistoric dinosaur, while others believed it was some kind of gigantic monster. Pure dread was now visible on everyone's faces. Jack himself was secretly terrified to the core. However, he knew very well that if they wanted to make it out of this island alive, reaching that cockpit was their only shot. With that goal in mind, he took Charlie and Kate along and ventured into the perilous depths of the jungle. Shortly after they started, the sky suddenly broke open with a torrential downpour, making it even harder to locate the cockpit within the dense forest. Meanwhile, back at the crash site, the survivors taking shelter inside the plane felt the terrifying creature awakening once more. However, the three inside the woods had absolutely no clue about the danger brewing behind them. After hours of combing through the thick jungle, they finally stumbled upon the nose section of the aircraft. Stepping inside, they discovered that all the first-class passengers had already lost their lives. Jack cautiously walked toward the cockpit door, picking up a piece of metal scrap to pry open the jammed lock. But just a moment later, a lifeless body suddenly tumbled right out of the cockpit, startling them. Once the dust settled, Jack stepped inside the cockpit and began searching through the wreckage for the signal device. Right then, the pilot unexpectedly showed signs of movement. Looking closely, Jack realized that the pilot was miraculously still alive. Fortunately, he had only sustained a minor head injury. As he regained awareness, the pilot began explaining the chilling details behind the tragic crash. He revealed that as their flight was passing over this mysterious patch of ocean, all communication signals vanished into thin air. Sensing immediate danger, he desperately tried to turn the aircraft around, but an unnatural and mysterious draft of wind suddenly seized complete control of the plane. There was something else out there in the dark. Just then, the pilot remembered there was a backup transceiver system inside the plane. However, he quickly delivered the crushing news that this primary signal device was completely broken. Hearing this, their spirits sank instantly. But right at that moment, an eerie, terrifying noise echoed from outside, and the entire nose section began shaking violently. Paralyzed with fear, everyone inside froze and stared out the window. At that exact second, a massive shadow was seen passing right next to the aircraft. The moment the pilot stepped closer to the glass to see what was happening, an unknown, terrifying entity snatched him and violently dragged him out. Witnessing this horrific sight, Kate let out a blood-curdling scream. Before Jack could even process what happened to help him, the mysterious beast brutally slaughtered the pilot, leaving him covered in blood. Following such a gruesome death, the atmosphere grew incredibly tense and terrifying. But before they could even think of a plan, the plane began swaying violently again and suddenly collapsed from the trees to the ground with a massive thud. The impact threw the three of them in different directions. Wasting no time, Jack quickly grabbed the signal device and sprinted into the deeper parts of the jungle. The bone-chilling roars echoing behind them only intensified their dread. Fortunately, the mysterious creature decided not to hunt them down, allowing all three to catch their breath and head back toward the camp. However, as soon as they stepped into the campsite, they found two men locked in a brutal fistfight. Jack and Michael immediately rushed in and managed to pull them apart. Upon questioning, it was revealed that James heavily suspected Carly was somehow responsible for the entire plane crash. His logic was that although everyone else sitting in Carly's section had died, he miraculously survived without a scratch. Infuriated by this wild accusation, Carly lost his temper, and the situation almost turned violent again. That was when Kate screamed at the top of her lungs, finally forcing both men to calm down. She then broke the real news to the group. They had found the signal device, but it was currently completely dead and damaged. If they wanted to call for a rescue team to get off this island, fixing that device was their only option. Upon hearing this, everyone stared at each other blankly, as none of them had any technical skills to repair such machinery. Finally, Carly stepped forward and announced that he could fix it. Predictably, James lost his temper again and started shouting in protest. Seeing the unnecessary drama, Jack snapped, completely losing his patience, and harshly warned James to shut his mouth. Intimidated by Jack's sudden rage, James backed down and didn't utter another word. Once the chaos quieted down, a fantastic piece of news came to light. It turned out that Carly used to serve as a communications officer in the military, and since this transceiver was from a military aircraft, repairing it was right up his alley. He immediately got to work without wasting a single second and managed to bring the dead device back to life in no time. However, a major roadblock appeared. The battery was almost completely drained. Now, if they wanted to broadcast a distress signal to save their lives, they would have to take the machine to a much higher altitude. When Kate curiously asked exactly how high they needed to go, Carly pointed toward a massive, towering mountain peak in the middle of the jungle. The moment Kate saw that sky-high cliff, her heart sank, having barely escaped death moments ago and being terrified of risking her life all over again. Realizing they were completely out of options, Kate decided to head into the perilous jungle with 4 other survivors without informing Jack. Along the way, James unexpectedly caught up and joined their group. He intentionally shoved past Kate, aggressively taking the lead. Kate was deeply irritated by his obnoxious and rude behavior. Little did she know, this very man was about to step up and save all their lives. After navigating a series of rugged, winding mountain trails, they finally arrived in the heart of a dense forest. Even there, James kept relentlessly mocking Carly, blaming him for the aviation disaster. Sick of the constant insults, Carly finally snapped and turned around to confront him. Right at that exact second, a bizarre and chilling sound echoed from behind. The roar was so terrifying that everyone froze, shifting their eyes toward the rustling bushes ahead. Something dangerous was charging directly at them at a frantic speed. Panic set in instantly, and the group scattered in all directions to save themselves. Amazingly, James stood his ground like a rock, showing absolutely no signs of fear. Once the others had cleared out, he pulled a handgun from his pocket and unleashed a barrage of bullets at the oncoming threat. However, the creature was an absolute beast, absorbing the gunfire as if it were nothing. Fortunately, one of James' desperate shots managed to hit the animal's weak spot. Hearing a massive, agonizing shriek, the rest of the group rushed back to the scene, but when they got a clear look at the creature, they were completely jaw-dropped. This was no mythical monster or alien. It was a massive, ferocious polar bear. The ultimate shock for everyone was trying to understand how on earth a polar bear could exist on a scorching tropical island covered in dense jungle. For a second, they genuinely wondered if the trauma of the crash was causing them to hallucinate. But the real twist was yet to come, as a burning question gripped everyone's minds. How did James manage to board a commercial flight with a loaded handgun? When the group confronted him, he quickly defended himself, claiming he had salvaged the weapon from the corpse of a dead police officer. To back up his story, he pulled a law enforcement badge from his pocket and showed it to them. This eased their suspicions a bit, and they resumed their trek up toward the mountain peak. Right on cue, the signal bars on the transceiver suddenly maxed out. Without losing a moment, Carly immediately tried to broadcast a distress call. However, he quickly realized that someone else was already transmitting on the emergency rescue frequency. This meant they weren't alone. Another person on this island was continuously sending out a plea for help. It baffled everyone how anyone else could possibly survive in such a desolate place. As they stood there lost in thought, a woman's voice suddenly cracked through the static of the device. Listening intently, they recognized it as a Frenchwoman's voice, which instantly made them believe a rescue party was close by. Overjoyed by this sudden hope, their excitement knew no bounds. They quickly urged the survivor, fluent in French, to communicate with the presumed rescue team. Within seconds, however, the cheerful expressions vanished from their faces. It wasn't a live rescue team at all, but rather an agonizing distress loop recorded a very long time ago. Suddenly, the signal cut out entirely. Carly quickly analyzed the transmission frequency and uncovered a spine-chilling truth. According to his technical calculations, this distress signal had been broadcasting on a loop for the past 16 years. Yet in over a decade, no one had ever responded to it. The grim reality hit them hard. The outside world had absolutely no idea anyone was trapped on this island. This devastating realization shook everyone to their core. A flood of unanswered questions raced through their minds. What was that terrifying entity lurking in the dark woods? How did a polar bear end up in a tropical jungle? And what actually caused their plane to tear apart mid-air? These supernatural and bizarre events were breaking their spirits from the inside out. They were now convinced that a dark, massive conspiracy was hidden in the heart of this island. And with that, the first and second parts of this mysterious story come to a close. But let me tell you, the next chapter is going to be 10 times more chilling and absolutely terrifying. If you want to see part 3 as soon as possible, drop up part 3 right now in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends. For those who are brand new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss these mind-blowing movie recaps. I'll see you guys very soon in the next explosive episode. Until then, take care and stay safe.